where two Israeli embassy staff members were fatally shot outside a outside a Jewish museum. And the victims, which was a young couple soon to be engaged, were targeted by a gunman who shouted "Free Palestine" during their attack. Authorities are investigating this as a target act of terrorism. Absolutely, I believe this was a target attack of terrorism because he went to a Jewish museum where he likely believed that the people who were in the museum, majority of them were probably Jewish, and essentially whoever was coming out at the time that he was targeting and planning and to execute this attack, he was going to unalive, unfortunately. And this is all due to the war, conflict, and battle between Hamas is Israel, but a lot of Palestinians have been unalive in this aftermath, okay, who has been, again, been the tragedy of a war that has killed over 40,000 people. And we're talking on both sides. So if you take into account the Jewish lives that were lost, if you take into account the Palestinian lives that were lost, we're talking roughly over 44,000 people who have perished because of this war. And to me, I think it's more daunting that people are being unalived for a war that is happening over 7,000 miles away from America. Why are people violently protesting? Why are people protesting around college campuses and around America in courtrooms? It's because America is funding a large part of this war by the way of Israel. Now, no matter your stance on this, I wonder when the UN is going to be more involved, NATO is going to get more involved, some of these groups from the G20 summit are going to be more involved. So again, we can render any sort of ceasefire or peace agreement that can save thousands of lives on both sides. Now, of course, in this regards, the aggressor at this current moment are the Israeli Defense Forces, whereas they're trying to sort out, unalive, and capture the Hamas terrorists. But unfortunately, in that wake, there have been a lot of innocent Palestinians who've been killed. So again, I'll try to keep you guys abreast of everything that's essentially going on with that. But unfortunately, that is the current state where people are going to, because again, even though we have people who've been unalive because of this, this great tragedy, I just wonder when will come to end to the war in the Middle East against all these different countries. I want to share this news clip with you guys very quickly so you guys can hear it. Give me 1 second.
Blooded political assassination.
Today, Elias Rodriguez is being described by authorities as a terrorist fueled by hate and anti-Semitism, charged with firearms violations and murdering foreign officials.
Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, especially in the nation's capital. Now, we're going to continue to investigate this as a hate crime and a crime of terrorism.
And we're learning disturbing new details that the suspect had flown into the Washington area on Monday and checked a 9mm handgun in with his luggage. The FBI says he bought a ticket to the event being held at the D.C. Capitol Jewish Museum, his alleged target location. Is there...
So I guess the only questions that I essentially have when it comes, again, to this terrorist attack, as they always are, when it comes to the government, they always state that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated, in any part of America, she say for the nation's capital. Well, Palestinian people, okay, Palestine, Philistine, however you guys want to pronounce it, they are Semitic people as well. So is she referring just to Jewish people, or is she referring to Palestinian people as well? Here's another thing. I've really never heard anyone from any jurisdiction, city, state, ever say that anti-Black hate crimes will not be tolerated. I hear from other communities, I've heard when they had attacks on the Asian communities, that anti-Asian hate will not be tolerated, but I have yet to hear anti-Black hate will not be tolerated from any of our government officials on a large stage, like from a city like D.C. Not very large in landmass, but again, very important to our country as the nation's capital. But I never heard those same sentiments when it comes to Black people. Even though when you look at the FBI data, the CIA data, the Department of Justice data, Black people are the number one group of people that hate crimes are committed the most against. And I'm not trying to make this a Black, Jewish, Palestine thing. I'm just looking at this in comparison. It's just a small comparison because I'll hear public figures come out and talk against hate of any other group on a national stage. So I think the comparisons are very relevant because we don't get that same energy. Now, let me talk about Harvard very quickly because the university argues that this move that Trump is doing is unconstitutional and retaliatory, impacting over 7,000 international students who play very pivotal roles in teaching, research, and sports. And the Department of Homeland Security justified the ban by accusing Harvard of fostering an unsafe campus and collaborating with the Chinese Communist Party. Harvard President Alan Gabbard defends the university's principles and highlights the potential loss of global student applicants. Now, this is very contradictory of Harvard because the only reason why they're suing the Trump administration is because the Trump administration stopped all funding for Harvard. So they're stating because of the Trump administration cuts to Harvard's fund, that they no longer can garner the best talent around the world of their international students to come to Harvard. How are you suing the government that was giving you free money, taxpayer money, the money that you and I have been working for, because you cannot go around the world and pick the best out of their countries? The Trump administration, the mindset and the thought process and the actions behind this right here. Are you guys looking at this? Because the U.S. government has come under scrutiny for deporting individuals, including those from countries like Vietnam, Myanmar. And don't forget, Myanmar is going through a civil war / genocide themselves. And South Sudan, they're going through a civil war and genocide themselves. But nonetheless, nations that are, South Sudan is a nation that has been plagued by conflict and instability. And a federal judge has ruled that this action violates a court order raising concerns about the safety and legality of such deportations. I mean, these people are not even native to the land. I want to see the reports from the president of South Sudan in accepting illegal immigrants from America that are not native born to Sudan. Now, out of all these pictures, you see one person, okay? Don't get me wrong. Sudanese people are more likely to look at, more likely to look like the gentleman in the top right corner of your screen. The Black gentleman here. Sudanese people are usually tall. They're usually, especially the men, they're usually 6 feet or taller, slender in build, and they have a very, their skin color, their melanin is very rich, right? It's not their skin tone. I'm trying to explain it because again, they have a very beautiful skin tone, but in some regards, depending on whether it's at night or it's in the day, they can almost look blue because it's so rich. Their melanin is so rich. In some regards, they can also look purple to a certain degree, but more blue than anything because they have such dark, rich melanin. And I've never heard of any reports like the gentleman in the middle. He may be from Venezuela, but he does look like a white man, but he's probably from Venezuela. And all these other gentlemen here that you see, Vietnam as well as Myanmar. And then the top left guy here and the guy right under the Black gentleman looks as though they're probably from Venezuela. Okay. And the other gentlemen look Asian. But nonetheless, he's sending non-native people, non-native to Sudan. I'm very curious of why this occurred. Now, the states here that the foreign men convicted of crimes were placed on a deportation flight headed for the chaotic nation of South Sudan. Do not forget, South Sudan is at civil war. There's a genocide that's occurring over there, and you are deporting people to a very unstable country that do not identify with the language, that do not identify with the people. Now, it states here were originally from countries as far as Vietnam. They had lived in various places from California, Iowa, Nebraska to Florida, with one serving a sentence of nearly 30 years. They were accused of convicted crimes ranging from murder to rape, robbery, and assault. Despite their criminal records, a federal judge says the White House violated a court order on deportations to third countries, adding these 8 migrants aboard the plane were not given a meaningful opportunity to object that the deportation could put them in danger. Absolutely. It goes on to state that no country on earth wanted to accept them because their crimes are so uniquely monstrous and barbaric, said Tricia McLaurin, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security. So instead of keeping them in prison in America, they basically sent them to their death. They basically sent them to war. And it goes on to state at least one of the victims' family members has come out to oppose the way the deportation was conducted and the fact that her family wasn't notified, while saying she had hope the man will leave the United States. These are the migrants who are part of the deportation flight. And my only response to this is, why not just send them back to their country? If these are illegal migrants, no matter if their country wants to accept them or not, these are your citizens. These are your people. We're sending them back home, but they send them to a land that they have no affiliation, no cultural simulants, okay? No. In comparison, there's nothing that these gentlemen here have in common with the South Sudanese people. So, in my opinion, I believe they really sent them to their death or to an area where they may be tortured, okay? I just don't see a positive outcome for these gentlemen. For majority of these gentlemen, I do not see a positive outcome. And again, if you have people from other countries, they should be deported to their own country, okay? And let their own country deal with them.